Brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football in the NFL with Rhythm. Get your set and future all the day. Look at sportscam.com. RETHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the MLB Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Sunday morning, roughly 11 a.m. Eastern Time on October 13th. I'm your host of this episode, Scott Reichel, joined by Dylan Rockford, and together we're going to break down the NLCS involving an unbiased perspective from Dylan, as we're going to be looking at the Mets, his favorite team, taking on the Dodgers in the NLCS for a spot to make the World Series. But Dylan, how's it going with you? I know a couple months ago you probably didn't expect your team to get this far. Now you're just with house money. How does it feel?
Oh, it feels great, Scott. I was in the building for the closing game on Wednesday against the Phillies, and I had a 70-year-old man hug me after Edwin Diaz struck out the last guy. Always makes it interesting. You gotta love Edwin Diaz. But after that strikeout, he asked if he could hug me. I was like, yeah, come on in, man. So it was good. It means a lot. But yeah, you're right. We're playing with house money right now, just 8 wins away. And to be honest, I kind of wanted to play the Dodgers here. I really didn't want to play the Padres, but it's going well, and yeah, can't wait for breaking down game one of the NLCS.
Yeah, I think the actual, I'd say, script for this episode, we're going to briefly just recap the path of the Dodgers and the Mets, respectively, just going through how they got to this point. Then we'll get into the actual series with the prices, talking about our thoughts, the handicap for the overall series. Then we'll segue into game one. How does that sound to you?
It sounds amazing. Let's get to it.
Cool. So before we actually do start off with the recap of the last round, do want to remind me once again that we are currently having a fundraiser with the network, as SGPN has been trying to raise some money for the victims of Hurricane Helene, which has been devastating to the people of Western North Carolina. SGPN is teaming up with a local charity, mountainprojects.org, to help give back. Biggest donation, we'll get a guest spot on the College Football Pick Show and a ton of gear. Go to mountainprojects.org, hit flood support, help out today. Thank you in advance. Plus, a reminder that if you are listening to this podcast, the MLB Gambling Podcast, on YouTube, you still can show some support by heading over to Spotify and leaving us a 5-star rating and a review. Only you can help prevent corporate gambling from taking over. Anyway, starting off with the actual recap portion of the last round, the NLDS ended up seeing the Mets look pretty comfortable, actually, against their division rivals. Now, I would say that the games were not necessarily straightforward, but they got the job done because the Phillies bullpen couldn't get it out if their lives depended on it. So the Mets ended up winning the series 4-1. 3-1. I mean, it could have been a sweep. We ended up seeing the Mets come back in the ninth inning of Game 2. Then they ended up losing the game in extras, but or I should say, in extras they ended up losing. No, sorry, that was in the ninth inning. So point is, they were trailing. Then you saw Vientos at the 2-run homer, and then you ended up seeing the Phillies walk it off in the ninth. So the Phillies could have gotten swept, but it looked like the Mets were pretty comfortable for most of the series, mainly because every time the starter came out for Philly, they couldn't get an out. And that's kind of how the series went. Now, as for the Dodgers, they had a much trickier time because they had to fight off elimination not once but twice, and both times they won via shutout, as the Padres didn't score for about the last 24 innings of that series. Dylan, I'm going to ask you, what exactly were your takeaways from the NLDS for both teams?
We'll start with the Mets. Both for them, I thought it was really good. I thought, with their starting pitching, Manaea being really good. Kodai Senga, he had one bad pitch. He left up in game one, but outside of that, I felt like our starting pitching really was good. First 5 innings were under for both teams. I mean, starting pitching was really good for both sides, but like you said, the bullpen for the Phillies really couldn't muster out to save their lives. And really through the 6th to the 8th inning, that's when all the offense for both teams kind of started to get going. So, yeah, it was good. I think the rest definitely helped the Mets and their starting rotation. I think our bullpen still is an issue a little bit. 13 walks in the postseason. You can't do that against this Dodger team. So they're going to have to rest up for that. But outside of that, I think our offense needs to get it going a little bit. Outside of Vientos and Lindor, they're kind of struggling a little bit, but I thought it was really good for the Mets. And this team, I know it's very cliche, Scott, and I've seen really bad Met teams, but this team just doesn't quit. I don't know what it is. Whenever they're down, whenever they're out, they just come alive. And when Lindor hit that grand slam, it was so nonchalant to him. He was walking around the bases like it was kind of nothing. But vibes are high, I guess, for the Mets right now. And got a lot of love in the chat from the Mets, which I like to see. But as for the Phillies, I mean, I'll ask you this question real quick. Do you think their window is done? I thought this was the most complete team they've had in quite a while.
Yeah, it's always tough to evaluate the window when you have Harper signed up for that long. You kind of have to wonder if they are automatically priced into a longer window, basically until he's off the team. Now, the Phillies, I don't know if it's a way that they're wired, where it just seems like the team is so hyper focused on home runs that when they don't actually hit them, they have problems of actually generating runs. So I don't want to say it's an over reliance on home runs, but it kind of feels that way when you're watching the series. Schwarber, for example, in game one hits a bomb, and then they proceed to just not score again until the ninth inning. So it's kind of one of those where you're waiting for Phillies bats to get going as well, and it seemed like they really just couldn't generate many big hits. On top of that, you ended up having the bullpen once again, which was a strength for most of the season, which ended up just unraveling for the entirety of the series. So the window's a bit tricky because it depends how seriously you took the Phillies in the first place. You could argue that with the Dodgers being around with Ohtani and, of course, with Betts and everybody like that, the Braves were very injured. So the Phillies were kind of fortunate that they ran in this division unopposed, where the Braves got too injured and the Phillies were kind of running away with this division for, I don't even know, like 2-3 months at this point. So I feel like you make an argument that the window isn't officially closed, but they might have to look inward, trying to adjust maybe the overall. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. The overall mindset of the offense, where it just feels like they are so dependent on home runs that they just have a hard way of actually manufacturing runs via small ball or stuff like that. And that's what killed them in the playoffs last year. Face off against the Diamondbacks, they had 2 shots at home to advance to the World Series. The bats got cold because they couldn't hit a home run. They ended up losing both games. It just feels like there's some type of, I don't want to say block, but just some type of misunderstanding of how to generate runs in playoff baseball. And it just feels like if nobody's hitting home runs, they got problems. And even in the game they won in this series, where Castellanos had the walk-off and everything, there was an error by Vientos, which played a factor, but they came back in the game because Severino gave up home runs to Castellanos and Harper. It just feels like they were waiting for somebody to hit home runs. Nobody really did. And once that happened, the offense shut down. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. If they're not hitting the home runs, they really don't have a guy in that lineup to come up with that big hit. I know Bryson Scott had a nice hit down the line, but outside of that, you're right. You hit it right on the head. It all looked like everyone was waiting for either Schwarber, Harper, or Castellanos, or even Trey Turner. I feel like Trey Turner's been a little MIA as well. You spend all that money on him. Everyone was looking for that top of the lineup to produce, and they just couldn't. So it was very unfortunate for them, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't happy for their misery. But yeah, I thought it was a really good series, and I think it's going to benefit the Mets to have those extra 2 days rest.
Yeah, I think the worst player in the series, unrelated, was Alec Boehm, who I know was in the home run derby. He had a very solid season in general, but he was atrocious, both offensively and defensively in the entire series. But anyway, once again, nice job of the Mets. Got the job done there in 4. Could have been 3. Doesn't matter, though. Survive in advance, and we'll see how they do in this one. Now, for the Dodgers, they had, once again, a more stressful path because they had to fight off elimination twice. And you're looking at the Dodgers, and, of course, unlike the Mets, they didn't really have to come from behind that often in that Padres series because the Padres stopped hitting. And once that happened, the series was just over because the Padres couldn't score. So the Dodgers, I thought, had a great overall pitching performance in the last 2 games. Saw Darvish pitch pretty well for the Padres. Couple of bad pitches, couple solo shots. It is what it is. But you ended up seeing Yamamoto pitch very well. That's why they paid him a lot of money to come over from Japan. He was very good. And they did a bullpen game for game 4, and that worked out quite well. They ended up winning that game by a pretty convincing margin, 8-0, because Cease had nothing for San Diego, and that game was over pretty quickly. Do want to ask you, though, for the Dodgers, because even though we might agree that San Diego was the more complete team, at least based on the rotation, do want to ask you what your thoughts are on this Dodgers team quickly, just because of the fact that I feel like for most years, that was a perfect Dave Roberts just laydown spot where they lose in 4 or 5.
Yeah.
You laugh at Dave Roberts. Classic tradition, which I love in October.
Yeah.
But then you move on. But it seems like the Dodgers actually showed some mental toughness, which I haven't really seen from this team in a couple of years.
Especially going into Wednesday, kind of facing elimination, tie up the series on a bullpen day where you expect Dylan Cease. Padres have the, I guess, privilege of throwing one of their aces and him just getting blown up in, I think, 1-2 innings. So Yeah, these are the times of year where, besides the pandemic year when they won, which we'll put an asterisk on, outside of that, like you said, we usually see him fail in making decisions like that. But the bullpen day really helped out for Game 4. And then Game 5, I think Yamamoto, he pitched amazing besides a few pitches, like you said. But yeah, I thought it was really good. And to be honest, like you said earlier, they're a hurt team. Freddie Freeman's dealing with an ankle injury. Mookie Betts, he had a slow start to this postseason. He has hit a few home runs now. But yeah, I just think for a hurt team, I think the manager is really hitting all the buttons right now. So it's unfortunate, but we'll talk about it. But I do think this is going to be a really good series here for the Mets.
Yeah. Do you want to ask you, though, is there anything else you want to talk about from an NLDS perspective, or do you want to just move on? Am I forgetting anything?
No, maybe the collapse of the Padres. Did you expect them to move on? Because I thought going into a bullpen game,
I think we all did. I mean, just to cut you off there, I feel like most people thought after the Dodgers fan fiasco in Game 2, and then you saw the Padres win Game 3, you had the Teoscar Grand Slam, and then you thought, okay, this game's going to be an all-timer, and then nobody scored again for about the last 6 innings, and the Padres ended up winning 6-5. I'm sure most people thought the series was over. Now, I hated the idea of starting Cease on 3 days rest after he got shelled in game 1 or 2. I thought that was, after Game 1, I thought that was an insanely bad idea, but Cease was terrible the entire series. So the bullpen game, it's not about the Dodgers piecing together a good bullpen day. It's about the Padres offense just doing absolutely nothing. After scoring 5+ runs in the first 3 games of the series, Tatis couldn't really get out. It felt like Tatis was going to get hit at the extra base hit every time he was up. And you saw a couple guys come through. Higashioka had home runs early in the series. Merrill had a solid series early on. And then nobody did anything. The entire team just shut down. So I would put it this way. I was surprised the Dodgers responded the way they did. Because based on Dave Roberts' postseason history, when it's not on a bubble on a 60-game regular season, usually they roll over when things get tough and they deal with adversity. And they didn't. They looked really good. And San Diego choked. And you could argue that, once again, the Dodgers were a very solid team. And the Padres, look, I'm going to be honest. If you are up 2-1 in a series with 2 shots to win and you don't score again, that's a choke job.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Your offense has to produce. You didn't produce anything. It's one thing if you lose a game 5-4. It's close, some breaks don't go your way. You got to score for at least the last 24 innings. That's embarrassing.
Not to go backwards, but do you think the Phillies should have started Zach Wheeler in Game 4 on Wednesday? Kind of what Padres started Dylan Cease on short day rest? Because I don't know. I felt like the Mets could not hit him for 7 innings. And then they put in Ranger Suarez in hopes to go back to the bank, but they never really got there.
I mean, it's really tough to evaluate without hindsight, because I thought Wheeler was going to go in Game 4, but then it turns out they made a decent decision. Suarez left a bunch of guys on base, but he did get through a bunch. He got through a couple innings. I didn't think Suarez was that bad. He walked a lot of guys. Mets felt like they stranded the bases loaded basically every inning. Shout out to JD Martinez and Jose Iglesias. But it does seem like the Phillies hit the right buttons. The issue was when your bullpen's useless, I don't know what you're supposed to do. A part of me was actually wondering if Wheeler would come out of the bullpen for Game 4 because every reliever couldn't get an out. It was kind of crazy. Hoffman came in, immediately sucked. Then they tried to switch, and you ended up bringing in Estevez, and he gave up the bomb to Lindor. So it didn't matter. I can't get mad at Thompson because every reliever they had was useless in the series. There were no right options to actually hit. I can't give you a better blueprint, even in hindsight. Yeah. Everybody kept giving up hits, so I don't know what you're supposed to do. But for the Dodgers, nice job by Roberts. I thought managed a very good series, and we'll see what happens here, because the Dodgers' rotation wasn't great in that series, and they got by. Yamamoto was great after struggling in Game 1, which they won anyway, because Cease was bad in both games too. But yeah, I thought that overall Roberts had a good series, and we'll see if he can make it 2 in a row. But before we get into the actual series here for the NLCS, do remind me once again that we are brought to you by Munaf Fantasy, because they have a lot of great pick-em menu items. And a reminder, they have the NFL, college football, MLB, MMA, WNBA, NASCAR, and more. We'll have this jam-pack with profit boosts, United Specials, and boosts on our flex entries. For my entry today, you know what? I'll go for a nice D-Gen play, because, of course, we love a good D-Gen play on the show. Give me Alvin Kamara, longest rush lower 15.5 yards. We'll go with that one as my DGen play. Sign up the promo code NLDS though, to claim your special first-time deposit offer up to $1K in bonus cash on your fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the MLB Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the NLDS. Now it's time to move on into the NLCS, Dodgers versus Mets. Now, for the actual price here, you're going to use DraftKings for the lines. You have the Dodgers at -180. You have the Mets at around +150 for the actual game spread, for the spread up for the series. Dodgers -1.5 +115. Mets +1.5 -135. If you want to go for the over-under in games, you can get the over 5.5 at -175. Under is +145. The over 6.5 +205. And the under 6.5 -250. First official series, which is 4 out of 7. And the Dodgers, I said before, are going to be the favorites here. Probably because, one, reputation, B, they have home field advantage, if that actually means anything in baseball. Thus, for the Mets, they're the only team to not lose a home game yet so far this postseason. So, do you want to ask you, Dylan, do you think, first of all, that -180 is a fair price for the Dodgers? We got to start there.
Yeah, I think you said it best. I think on name recognition and history, that's why they're favored. Now, do I think it's fair? I think they're a little bit high of a favorite. I probably would have priced them around a -150, -160, but yeah, I don't know if they have a true home field advantage, just because I think atmosphere-wise, Citi Field is much louder and much more a better crowd than Dodger Stadium, which they don't really come into later into the game. But I don't know. I think they deserve to be the favorite. I don't think they deserve to be this big of a favorite. I'll start there.
Yeah, I think I can get behind that. I think Dodgers should be, in my opinion, like -140 if I had to price it myself. Something that feels like the Dodgers, you assume over time, based on the talent on paper, would wear down a Cinderella Mets team, at least based on projection. If you're looking at just roster breakdowns, 180 does feel a bit steep. Because I understand the Mets, you can argue on paper, I don't want to say don't hold a candle to this team, but you assume the Dodgers should win the series in like 5 or 6 on paper. You got to account for the actual behind-the-scenes stuff, whether it involves magic or just overall team chemistry. You said the Mets never quit, and you're right. They just never roll over. They seem to always have the, I'd say, mental toughness to overcome any adversity in their path, and they've been doing it, whether it involves the Brewers, of course, in the final game of that 3-game series. Shout out to Alonso. Whether it involves the Phillies series, where they seem to constantly just torture this Phillies bullpen and keep every game close. It does seem like the Mets, I don't want to say team of destiny, but based on all of the check marks you look for, they fit a lot of those boxes. Now, the Tigers were also kind of a team of destiny in the American League, and we saw them run out of gas because their star player ended up kind of unraveling there in the 5th inning, and Lane Thomas sabotaged my parlay, hitting a grand slam. But the point is, you are looking at the Tigers being the team of destiny in the AL. They eventually ran into a team that was better than them, and they lost. And now the Mets are in a similar boat. Now, the Mets did upset a team that I thought was going to beat them in the Phillies. I just thought the Phillies were deeper. And I thought after last year, the Phillies would be a bit more, I'd say, focused from start to finish to actually kind of get done what needed to be done after what happened last year. And that just didn't happen. They were even worse than I thought they were going to be. But do want to ask you, for the sake of the actual series, even though it is -180, and even though we think there might be a little bit of value on the Mets at +150, for the actual handicap spread for this series, would you rather take the Dodgers -1.5 games at around +115, or would you rather take the Mets +1.5 games at around a -135?
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Mets +1.5. Obviously biased. I'm a Met fan. I would even sprinkle.
Really? I didn't notice. You're a Mets fan?
Yeah, exactly. Or the Mets to reach the World Series at +150, like I said. But to be honest, those are I put them in already, but those are just sprinkle. I guess my official play for this series, it's a little chalky, but I do like the over 5.5 games at -175. You mentioned it earlier in the show. Dodgers, they're a little banged up, and I think the Mets can win a game or two, maybe at home. You mentioned it, knock on wood. They haven't lost here at home yet. So I think the Mets, the one advantage I think the Mets do have in this series is the starting pitching with their top 3 guys, Sean Manaea. Jose Quintana has actually been really good. Luis Severino outside those 2 home runs, I think he's been good. Davidson Peterson, he's also been quiet. He's probably going to be that second guy behind Kodai tonight. But I think the Mets, they got those 2 extra days, so thankfully they're going to be a little more well rested than this Dodger team who had to play 5 games. But I do think the Dodgers do have the bullpen advantage, and the Mets pen, like I said, they've been a problem so far. They've walked 13 batters. You can't do that against this Dodger lineup. They will make you pay, and I think it's going to be a long, close series. I think it goes 7 games, so I do like the Mets plus 1.5 at -135. I like the over 5.5 games. And who would I be if I didn't take the Mets to win the series?
Yeah, I feel like the one thing that kind of surprised me was just how good the Dodgers bullpen was. They've
Yeah,
been kind of tinkering with it all year. I didn't think a bullpen game would work in the playoffs. Then
me
Yamamoto
either.
was great, and the bullpen was great again in Game 5. So, yeah, props to the Dodgers bullpen. I thought Trinan did a good job closing. Felt like they got exactly what they needed from everybody. And it just seemed like San Diego was overmatched in that entire series. Now, the problem with the Mets for the playoffs is the offense doesn't do anything until the 6th inning. So they might get themselves into some holes. They need to definitely work on to at least get to the starting pitcher at some point in this series. But for this series, I know I lean to the Phillies in the first 3 out of 5 series, just thinking that the Phillies eventually just had too much depth, and that just didn't play a factor at all because the bullpen couldn't get an out to save their lives. For this one, I think I agree with you about the Mets plus 1.5. I think the series does scream marathon to me. If I had to choose, though, between the value, in my opinion, at plus 1.5 games, -135, or Dodgers -1.5 and -115, -135 is a bit steep for me. I kind of wish it was like -120, but unfortunately, I'm not going to get that. I think the Dodgers, if I had to pick, will win the series, but it's not because I'm disrespecting the Mets. I recognize how good they've been. I recognize the overall morale and the overall chemistry this team has. But the Dodgers showed me something. I was skeptical of looking at them being so injury prone, the lack of a proper rotation with all the injuries they have. I mean, Bueller starting Game 3. Give me a break. The point is that you figure the Dodgers were going to roll over. I think we all thought that was going to be the case. Going back to Petco, they had all the momentum against them, and they came back and they showed me something. And the fact is, when you have that much talent, I know Freeman's banged up, but you have that much talent. Mookie remembers how to hit a baseball, and Ohtani had a great series, and the bullpen comes together. I know Flaherty's been kind of a mess. I'll mention him more in depth in a second. The fact is, I do think the Dodgers are the more talented team. And the fact is, with the bullpen pitching that well, I think eventually, I know that teams have done it where you have to kind of constantly rely on heroics and you find a way to get it done. It's a very slippery slope because if you find yourself behind quite often in these games, which the Mets did, if you're against even a halfway decent bullpen, you have some problems.
Yeah.
And I just feel like until the Mets actually break through against starting pitching, I have a hard time trusting them to beat a Dodgers team that I think bullpen-wise has looked very dialed in compared to the Phillies, who are basically just alternating batting practice pitchers for the last 4 innings of every game. So I'll go with the Dodgers in this one. I'll take the Dodgers in 7. That's kind of where I'm going. So I am going to lean to the Mets plus 1.5 games. Not going to bet it at around -135. Don't like the price. For this one, though, I mean, if you wanted to make an argument for Game 1 and the series segueing into Game 1, the Dodgers to win Game 1 and the series combined is plus 125. The Mets to win Game 1 and the series is plus 280. I think if I was going to go for an angle, it would be Dodgers Game 1 and series at plus 125. That's only because it's plus money, though. I think that's a decent price instead. That would be my main lean for that one, for the actual series. That would be my main play. But segueing into Game 1, do you want to ask you? Actually, we're going to do some series of player props. You want to do those first, or?
Yeah, because I was just going to ask you, because you mentioned Freeman kind of banged up. I kind of like Mark Vientos to have the most home runs in the NLCS. I know Shohei is obviously the clear favorite, but plus 850, I mean, for a guy who's been up and down at AAA, didn't make the final roster in the beginning of the season, he's just crushing right-handed pitching right now. They don't have a lot of lefties I feel like the Dodgers could throw at the Mets. And I just feel like this kid is just seeing the ball really well right now, hitting behind Lindor. So at plus 850, I think for just pure value and not taking the favorite, I think Mark Vientos could lead this NLCS with most home runs.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, you're looking at Vientos and what he's done in the postseason with, of course, the clutch home run he had in the 9th inning. He had a bunch of big hits. I don't mind that. I see a 7-1 on DraftKings, so shopping around 850 is definitely a good deal if you could find it. I'm trying to think of where I actually want to go for the most home runs prop, because Ohtani, I feel like, even though we know that he should be the favorite,
Yeah.
teams I just have to imagine are going to let anybody but Ohtani beat them. I thought about Muncy at 950 solely based on the power, but the Mets have so many lefty starting pitchers that I
Yeah.
am wondering if Muncy even potentially gets benched for one of these games, trying to like match up lefty righty. I like Teoscar at 10-1. We saw him homer against Darvish in Game 5. He won the home run derby. We know how talented he is. 10-1 feels like a great price for a serious home run hitter. I'll go with Teoscar in the market. I like the price quite a
Yeah, I
bit.
don't mind that. I like that.
Any other series props you want to go with?
No, I really didn't have any much series props, to be honest. Most strikeouts, I was looking at Sean Manaea as well. I mean, just the game he had in Game 3 was just fantastic. I think he will get the bump in Game 2. So on the road is where you really want to back Sean Manaea as well. And I just think he's been on one right now. So I was looking at Sean Manaea for most strikeouts here at plus 420. I like Jack Flaherty, but we'll talk about him here in Game 1 in a little bit. But I think there are bumps in the roads for him as well.
Yeah, I thought of maybe going for Betts 2+ stolen bases at plus 185. Just thinking that the Mets pitching staff, they've been working on it. Not the best at holding on runners. They got better as the season went on. But if we're looking at teams that can find openings, or I should say players that can be aggressive, I think Mookie can get on base and maybe steal some bases. So I don't mind that angle potentially at plus 185. But that market's pretty tough. I ended up losing the ALDS breakdown for that. I gave out Isbell to steal a base, and of course, he got caught stealing. I think he was the only guy to get caught stealing in the entire series for Kansas City, but that was how that went for me. But I think Betts 2+ steals makes some sense. Can walk, can find ways on base. We know how crafty he can be, and he got the home run swing back, so maybe teams will be more wary of pitching to him. So I don't mind Betts to steal 2 bases. You have any potential other props for this one?
No, those were the only 2 I really liked.
Okay. So moving on to the actual Game 1 breakdown, looking at the actual matchup, and you have Flaherty going, which we said before, can go well or poorly, but his playoff career suggests poorly because he's not been good in his postseason career. Now, for this one, you have Senga, who went 2 innings in Game 1 against Philly, gave up the home run to Schwarber immediately, then settled in and looked pretty good. Now, he went 2 innings, so I'm assuming Senga would probably go like 3 in this one if I had to guess. You mentioned that they're probably going to use Peterson to piggyback. I would agree with you on that one. For the actual money one, though, Dodgers are about minus 165. Shop around, though, and the Mets are about plus 140. The over-under is mostly available at 8, but ESPN bet does have 8.5, and the under is at minus 125. For the run line, Dodgers minus 1.5 plus 130. Mets plus 1.5 is minus 155. Dylan, I'm going to ask you, even though you are a Mets fan, so I'm really just wondering where you're going to go with this one. I'm going to ask you, where are you going with this one in Game 1?
Yeah, I only made the Dodgers a minus 155 favorite here, so I'm going to stay away from this side, even though, obviously, I am rooting for the Mets.
I mean, Flaherty at this big of a price to interject is definitely steep because Flaherty's
100%.
playoff career has been really, really bad. And to go through his actual series against the Padres, pitched 2 games, pitched 1 game in the series, then he had the finale of the regular season for him against the Padres. But he has given up at least 3 runs in 4 straight, and he gave up 4 runs and 2 homers in that start against the Padres. So, point is, not exactly looking that sharp, and his postseason career has not been good. I have the numbers written somewhere on Twitter, but they're not ideal. So, just to interject there, Flaherty being this big of a favorite in the postseason does feel a bit excessive.
Yeah, very excessive. But I do like for my official play here in Game 1, I like the under 8. You mentioned you could get 8.5 on ESPN bet. Low chalky at minus 125, but my total came out to 7.4. I do think Senga will likely have the ability to go, like you said, 3, maybe 4 innings, depending on how he goes. He'll probably get piggybacked by David Peterson, with maybe Tyler McGill after that. We'll see how it goes, but that kind of 3-man rotation we've seen, Senga, McGill, and Peterson, they've combined just 2 runs in 9 and 2 innings of work this postseason. And this Dodgers offense is different. They're averaging around 5.2 runs per game, but we have seen a drop in production when they're at home, 4.9 runs per game between the regular season and the playoffs. Like I said, the Dodgers pitching staff, they are looking to build off that streak of 25 total innings and 24 innings where they've seen opponents' bats with they haven't allowed a run. So 24 innings, like you said, or either the pitching staff has been really good or the Padres went completely cold. So the last runs they allowed came in the second inning of Game 3 of the divisional series versus the Padres. I agree. Jack Flaherty needs to be better than his first start or his history in the playoffs, but he is backed up by a bullpen, best bullpen besides the Yankees in this postseason, 2.2 ERA. They rank fourth among all teams during the regular season with a 3.53 ERA. Mets, they have a decent bullpen. Over the past 5 games, 23 of the Mets' 27 runs of offense have come, like you said, in the 6th inning or later. So with the way the Dodgers bullpen has come on strong, I just don't know if all these late game hits will be there in Game 1 or on the road. So I do worry about the Mets kind of struggling to offensively to get going a little bit. So I think we see a lower scoring game here tonight. I anticipate Jack Flaherty to be a little better, especially through the first time through the lineup. So I'm going to go under. That's going to be my official play. Under 8, like you said, if you can find 8.5 out there, I like that as well.
Yeah, that was my favorite play, the 8.5. Because even if one of these pitchers struggles, the bullpens are solid and they should have a pretty deep pen just based on the rest built in. Of course, the Mets had more rest, but the Dodgers did have a day off in between Game 5 and this. So you're looking at, once again, the Dodgers, which should be a pretty solid pen in general, maybe unloading if you end up seeing Flaherty struggle early. But I got to mention that, Ted. Dodgers won the regular season series 4-2. They did lose the first 2 games. I am going to point out these are very dated. They faced off in April and they faced off in May. Dodgers did win the last 4 games in the head-to-head by 3+ runs. So I do want to point that out at least, but either way, I'm not going to factor it in too much. Just going to throw it out there. Dodgers did win the regular season series by a score of 4-2. I mentioned before, Dodgers to win Game 1 and the series at about +125. I found appealing. I think it's a good deal. It's also an interesting spot for the Mets because even though we've seen them play well, I can't remember the last time they traveled to the West Coast. Because it's not the easiest actual scheduling spot. Yes, they had some extra prep time. I'm sure they got to LA early once Game 5 ended. Actually, no, not even, because they're going to go to California anyway. So I think they were probably already booking flights to California no matter what. But I'm trying to actually remember the last time they were in the West Coast, because they finished regular season in Atlanta, obviously, played Philly,
last week of August, they were in Arizona.
That's kind of my point. It's been over a month as they've been in the West Coast of the country. So I am wondering if maybe that's a bit of a, I don't want to say a jet lag spot, but I have to at least factor in the travel for both teams. When the Dodgers go back to New York, I'll factor that in too. But I got to at least mention it. So I am wondering if maybe it's a bad spot for the Mets. Flaherty have his postseason numbers here. They are not good. 30 in the third innings pitched, a 1-4 record. 30 hits allowed, a 4.15 ERA. So the ERA is not atrocious, but he's allowing basically a hit per inning. And he has a record of 1-4. So I am going with the under in this game, even though Flaherty I don't exactly trust. I think they might have a quick leash with him. And I think you're looking at what should be a very intense series, for better or worse. I know I have the Dodgers in 7. You have what I think is the Mets in 7. Is that what you have?
Yes, correct.
So based on that, I'm expecting a war, and I think that it's going to be a playoff atmosphere from start to finish. And the Mets, until they actually break through against the starting pitcher in the first 5 innings, I do think I'm going to have to lean to unders in this one. But once again, for this one, I think the Dodgers, in my opinion, are going to win Game 1, but I can't lay this price with Flaherty, and I really don't want the -1.5. So I'll just group it with the Dodgers to win the series. Give me Game 1 and Dodgers series at around +125. You're going to go with the under. I agree with you. That's my favorite play in the actual side or total. Now it's time for the actual player prop portion of the game. Dylan, I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts for the player props in Game 1?
Yeah, so the one I really like, and we could keep going on Jack Flaherty in this show, but I'm going to take his over 15.5 outs. A little chalky, -120, but I just think with the state of their starting rotation, the Dodgers are going to need Flaherty to go long in this game. I think the leash with Dave Roberts, the leash is going to be a little longer, especially this being a 7-game series. And even if you look at his last start in San Diego last Sunday, even though he got rocked for 4 runs, he still went over this number. He went 5 1/3 innings. So he still was able to go over this number. So I like over 15.5 outs for Jack Flaherty. And I'm going to take short number rightfully so, because we don't know how long he's going to go, but over 2.5 strikeouts for Kodai Senga, -110. I love it. Even in 2 innings, he struck out 3 batters against Philly. Like you said, he had that one bad pitch. He left upstairs to Kyle Schwarber. That ball's still probably going. But outside of that, he really settled in after that. I think he will go a little longer, maybe another inning or so. But, that goes for it. It's going to fool some batters. So I do think he'll get 3 strikeouts again. But, yeah, I do like over 2.5 strikeouts, for Kodai Senga and 15.5 outs for Flaherty.
Yeah, so my main props, I am going to go with Alonso. I'll go with the under 1.5 strikeouts at -135. Bit dangerous, but he has been good against Flaherty in his career, 2 for 3 lifetime. He's also not really struck out as much as you might think. He has had less than 2 strikeouts in 9 of the last 10 games. And to go back even further, he's had less than 2 strikeouts in 15 of the last 19 games. And it's available at -135, which I think is pretty appealing. So I'll go with Alonso to strike out less than 2 times at around -135 in this matchup. Also, I struck out less than 2 times in 9 of the last 12 head-to-head games against the Dodgers. So I like that angle quite a bit. Besides that, thinking of where else I want to go with this one, it is plus money, so I feel like I kind of have to at least consider it. It's Teoscar. I go with Teoscar over 1.5 hits, runs, and RBIs. Plus 110, I think is a great price. He's gone over in 8 straight games, and I do think no matter how well Sang is going to pitch, he's not going to go much length anyway. It's tough to pitch around Teoscar because the Dodgers have so many guys. We saw him homer in Game 5. I like his current form, mostly for plus money. I think plus 110 backing a Teoscar that is in great form, I think is a very good deal. I mean, home run in the game, for reference, is plus 575, which I think is pretty appealing. But yeah, he's homered in 4 of the last, I think that's 7, 4 of the last 8 games. And hits, runs, RBIs once again at 1.5 plus 110 on the over. Give me that. I like it for value. I like that play at plus 110. Anything else you want to add? Or is that it for player props?
No, that's it for player props for me.
Cool. So time for the lock and dog, or I should say maybe the best bet portion instead. But do want to ask you, though, before we officially segue into that, anything else you want to, I'd say, round out the NLCS coverage with? Any last talking points?
No, I just think it's going to be, like you mentioned, a really tough, long series. I think both of these teams know each other really well, and like you mentioned, I didn't even factor in the jet lag. I guess
it might not be a factor, but I'm at least going to mention they haven't traveled in basically
and it's
2
a
months.
good. I didn't even think of it, so yeah, no, I think that's a good talking point as well. But that I think we covered most of it.
Yeah. Either way, though, time to move on to. I'll let you choose. You want to do a lock and dog or a best bet?
I just have a best bet. I really don't have
okay, that's all I needed to hear. All right, that's fine. We'll do a best bet for that one. Maybe we'll also throw in a bonus one, though. We'll do a best bet for the series and for Game 1. We'll do it that way. But before we do that, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by BetUS, because BetUS has been around for more than 30 years. Easy to deposit using crypto. You know, lightning fast payouts. U.S. players are always welcome. Sign up and deposit $100 and have a chance to win a 1960 Ford Mustang. A reminder, use our link to sign up and get a 1.5% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits. Go to sportsgamblers.com/BetUS, sportsgamblers.com/BetUS, promo code SGPN. And a reminder, BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. SGPN's proud partner Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered sportsbook platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom models in seconds and get predictions on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top performing models on the leaderboard, or press build a model for me. Rhythm will give you a model instantly, giving you predictions on every game and player props. And they also have a bunch of stats, research, trend analysis to give you even more betting insight. And a reminder, try it out for free for a week. Use the link of sportsgamblers.com's Rhythm to get a 7-day free trial today. That's sportsgamblers.com's RATHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the MLB Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the NLCS, both the series and Game 1 between the Mets and the Dodgers. Now it's time for the best bet portion. We might throw in a home run pick, too. Why not, for Game 1. Dylan, I'm going to let you go first. What is your series best bet and your Game 1 best bet?
Yeah, series best bet. No surprise here. I'm going to take the Mets to win in 7 games. You could just take them to reach the World Series at plus 150. I think we do have the starting pitching advantage.
A reminder, by the way, you can take Mets plus 1.5 games minus 135 if you want to do that instead.
Yeah, I just don't want to lay you said, I do think it is a little chalky. I really wouldn't want to lay that as well. But for the Game 1 best bet, I think we're both aligned here. Under 8.5. There are 8.5s out there, but like you said, two really good bullpens. Dodgers much better bullpen than the Mets. 24 innings without allowing a run. Mets do struggle to. I mean, we left the bases loaded twice in the first 2 innings against Ranger Suarez, so we do struggle to hit in the beginning of the game. So, and as much as I love the Mets, I do think at a certain point their magic or heroics, whatever you want to describe it as, will run out. I really do think that. So eventually we are going to see some lower scoring games. I do like Kodai. I like the little 3-man rotation that they got with Senga, McGill, and Peterson picking back off of each other. Mets bullpen has been okay, and I just think we're going to see a really low scoring game here. So my best bet is going to be under 8.5, whatever you're able to get.
Yeah, so by the way, just in case you're wondering, the Mets to win in 7 is about plus 650, and you mentioned the price of the Mets to win the series. So if you want the Mets exact outcome 4-3, that's available at plus 650. Dodgers 4-3 is around plus 390. For my best bet, I'll do the game first. I'm on the under as well. 8.5, I think it's too high. I get the argument is these offenses have been performing well lately, but with this environment and with the overall just stakes at play, I expect to see a low-scoring start to the game. And even if one team breaks through, there's no guarantee the other team does. If the Dodgers or Mets score 5, there's no guarantee the other team scores 4. So a couple ways to get there as far as I'm concerned. So I am going to go with the under as my best bet for game 1 at around minus 125 on the 8.5. For the actual series best bet, trying to think if I want to go for anything with like game 1 combo with the series or not, because I still don't trust Flaherty at all. That's kind of the problem that I have, is that I have to figure out an angle that I can kind of appreciate, and I got to wonder if I actually want to take bets to have 2+ stolen bases at about plus 185. So I'm not sure if I actually want that, but I am trying to see if there's any other props that I could consider for this one. And I'm not sure if there really is. I think it's going to be a fun series in general, but I mean, there actually are team totals for the entire series if I want it. Mets team total in the series is 23.5. Dodgers is about 26.5. I'm looking at about 6 or 7 games, so that gets me to about somewhere between 4 and 5 per game. No, I don't really want that either. Yeah. So I think for this one, I am going to go with, I'll just do it. Give me the Dodgers to win game 1 and the series at plus 125. Like the price, I really don't want to lay 180 with the Dodgers to win the series, but I do think they're going to win it. So I'll go with the game 1 combo. Don't screw me over, Flaherty. I need one mediocre outing from you. Don't screw me over. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up for the actual best bets. And now it's time for the home run pick for game 1. Dylan, I'm going to let you go first. What is your home run pick for game 1?
Yeah, like I said, excuse me, I'm going to take Mark Vientos to hit a home run. It was around plus 4. No, that was for the series to hit a home run. Let me see here for game 1. Mark Vientos plus 390. I still like it. Like you mentioned, the struggles of Jack Flaherty, not just in game 1, allowing 4 runs. He gave up 2 home runs to San Diego as well. So not just in game 1 of the Padres, but in his postseason history, he hasn't been good. So I'm going to take Mark Vientos at plus 390 to hit a home run here in game 1.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to go with Teoscar at plus 575. So I'm going to have a home run in the elimination game against the Padres in game 5. He actually had a home run 2 of the last 3 games of that series. He's had a home run in 4 of the last 8 games. And plus 575 conceptually for the home run derby champion, I think is pretty disrespectful. You mentioned Vientos being 390. It's insane. He's like $2 cheaper than Teoscar. Yeah. I just think that's an insane price. I'll go for Teoscar in this one at about plus 575. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for the actual NLCS preview and the Game 1 preview of that series. Dylan, as the resident Mets fan, anything else you want to add before we officially end it?
No, just hope we see a really good series. I don't want to see any blowouts. And
that's a bunch of nonsense. You want the Mets to sweep? Who we can?
Yeah, I'll leave you.
It's a good series for you if they sweep. I mean,
I'll let you lead it. I'll end it with this 3 words: Let's go Mets.
Yeah, I thought that if you want to do 4 words, you can do "Oh my God, Mets" if you want to do that too. But either way, though, point is should be a fun series. Looking forward to seeing how these teams match up against each other, and we'll see what happens. New York sports. 50% chance to win the World Series. So we'll see what happens. But Might have to do it because the Liberty Blue game won. So maybe we might have to wait for baseball for a parade.
Hey,
Either
we
way,
got our Jets Monday night too. Monday Night Football.
That is true with a new with a new coach. So we'll see what can possibly go wrong in that spot. As far as I know, Hackett's still employed, but he's not calling plays. Anyway, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find him on Twitter at Rock with 2Ks24. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.